sing. This is the dearest that Jesus loves me. I'm so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me. I'm so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves even me. Though I forget him and wander away, still he doth love me wherever I stray. Back to his dear loving arms would I flee, when I remember that Jesus loves me. I'm so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me. I'm so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves even me. Oh, if there's only one song I can sing, when in his beauty I see the great King, this shall my song in eternity be. Oh, what a wonder that Jesus loves me. I'm so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me. Jesus loves me. I'm so glad that Jesus loves me. Jesus loves even me.
Our most kind, gracious Heavenly Father, indeed, Father, I thank you for this opportunity to sing songs of praises unto you and have a chance to study over a portion of my word and have a portion of my word preached unto us. Pray that we learn something from the word that we bring to our lives and help us present. Our responsibility to work through our list. Yes.
However close.
Fall down there and break your nose.
Yeah, I got it. You got it?
Morning, everybody. Morning. You can watch this if you want, but I think might just want to check the volume on while I'm talking, because I just kind of set it. Morning, Daniel.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Glad to be here.
Daniel made it out of the woods. All the hunting season must be over.
I just watch it nowadays.
Yeah, there you go.
Except another 2 weeks, then the rattlesnakes will be fair game. So
I saw some turkeys out in my house this morning.
oh, they're all in from out of state and the city, and
Yeah, turkeys.
Turkey
We get a lot of turkeys traveling through Pennsylvania. You say something like that? Yeah. Aaron, do you have an update on Dave? He hurt his leg, he said. Not broken or anything?
No,
So it's just a muscle, that's good. Now, that can be extraordinarily painful. Most of us at one time or another commiserate with that. Connie, I guess she's got the same deal with her ribs and stuff. But anyway, I'm just glad that you guys are here. And so this is kind of short notice for me, but I can always dredge up something. So I just thought, yeah, I always wake up in the morning singing a song. Up here. I didn't sing it out here, but it's up here. And the one that I was singing this morning was "Follow Me." It said, "Follow Me." Why not that? Look at the passages in the New Testament. There's a few passages in the Old Testament, for example, in the Judges, and I think maybe 4 passages where there's a "Follow Me," but it's not a "Follow Me" from God. It's a "Follow Me" from other people. Sometimes some of God's leaders, but that's expressed in different ways too. So it's not always the praise "Follow Me." But it's interesting that in the New Testament, Jesus says that if you look at Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are 20 references to where Jesus says, "Follow Me," and that's always fascinating me. And I had done a gospel meeting series on that years and years ago, and so I just thought, well, maybe let's talk about that this morning and see what the implications are in terms of what it means to follow Jesus. And we're talking about discipleship in the Sermon on the Mount, and there's a reason behind the madness. I thought with all of the different things, with the 2 different things we have coming up, right? We have Family Inspiration Day next Saturday, and then we have what's going to turn out to be I'm not exaggerating, I see it's the same. 2 Saturdays away. What do you mean? That's right. Okay, well, 2 Saturdays away. But anyway, with that and with Alan Webster coming in the fall, this is going to be a treat to have Brother Webster here. And I'll wait till a little bit later. If the elders want to talk a little bit about that, I'll let him handle it, or I'll be glad to fill you in on one of the others. But when you think of the things that we're doing, our Family Inspiration Day, for a lot of people, might be a once in a lifetime event. And so that's why we're trying to reach out. And certainly our meeting with Alan Webster, which by the way is going to be 5 days instead of 6 days, it's going to be a Sunday through a Thursday. But man, he's ever going to serve up some great stuff. I can't wait to fill you in on that. But that's going to be probably a once in a lifetime experience for all of us. Everybody else that we get to come. And I'm not trying to exaggerate, I'm just trying to lead up to this lesson just in terms of follow me. And that's really why I started working on the Sermon on the Mount, because I want to have the Sermon on the Mount pretty much finished, if not completely finished, by the time Brother Alan Webster comes, because the Sermon on the Mount is where Jesus is gearing up the concept of discipleship. Laid the foundation for discipleship, and he's building on the foundation of discipleship. A lot more of being a disciple than what we read in the verse in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. But it's all foundational to what discipleship is. And he builds on that good foundation a great deal. There's going to be added to further on too with the rest of his ministry and with the ministry of the apostles and the other inspired writers of the New Testament. And so this hopefully will help get us in the mindset of really putting forth a super effort as we get closer to that meeting in September, the 15th to the 19th. Try to get the word out, get the news out as much as we can, invite as many people as we can, because I think once you hear what's going on, you'll agree with me that for most of us, this will be a once in a lifetime deal. And so I hope that you think about it that way. Now think about this in terms of following Jesus. We'll look down just a few of these. There were some people to whom Jesus said, "Follow me," that reacted positively. Is that not right? And so when you think of those that Jesus said, "Follow me," who do you think of first? The apostles. They became the first disciples of Jesus. There were other disciples that came later, but the apostles became the first disciples. Okay, so what did they do when Jesus said, follow me? They followed. We'll look at some examples as we go down through here. But there were others to whom he said, follow me, that reacted negatively. And for the most part, they weren't rebellious. They didn't denigrate him. They just had things that were more important to do, they thought, than following Jesus. And so it's a matter of priorities in terms of the follow me that Jesus calls for. It's a matter of priorities, whether or not we're willing to follow him and do what he says or not do what he says. Now, sometimes people look back and they say, well, Jesus was alive, and so they saw him, they were impressed by him, they heard what he had to say. In the case of Philip and Nathaniel and Andrew going to get Simon, this is, we've found the Messiah. We have found the Messiah. Come listen, come see. And so they say, well, they saw Jesus and they heard Jesus, but we can't see Jesus and hear him vocally like this. So how do we follow him? By what means are we called? And how do we follow him? How would you answer that? Well, they followed him all over Judea for the most part, didn't they? Galilee, known as Judea, here in Jerusalem, over as far east as the Jordan River, and as far west as we think of some of the places Jesus visited, near the coast of Mediterranean Sea. So how do we imitate that? How can we do that since Jesus is not physically alive to tell us to follow him? Through his word. We do his word. Okay? The Bible tells us what that. And so he calls us through the word. He calls us through the word. And I think of what Paul said, and you think of in the Hebrew writer, and Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 31, that said that time would come when he would write his word on our hearts. Hebrews chapter 8, Hebrews chapter 10. Those say that. He writes his word on our hearts. And so if Jesus' word is in our hearts, we're following him that way too. It has to start with his word, doesn't it? It has to start with his word. And it's like Paul said in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. He says, so it's no longer me, but Christ who lives in me. Okay? So Christ lives in us when his word lives in us. And that helps us to organize our priorities. And so we can still follow Jesus essentially the same direction for the same reasons, but just in a bit of a different way. Because he spoke verbally to them, he's speaking to us through audibly to him, he's speaking to us through his words and through their words. And so that command to follow me is still a very important command. And so that's where the idea that discipleship, that the word disciple means a learner or a follower. Okay? But like I've said before, that's kind of a shallow definition. Because a disciple, somebody can say, well, I'm a follower of Jesus, but what does that mean? And what does that mean? There are a multitude of people in this country and around the world that profess to be followers of Jesus, disciples of Jesus. But does it mean the same thing to everybody that says it? Obviously not. Obviously not. Yes.
In Mark chapter 8, you have verse 34, says, when he calls people to himself, as disciples also, says that whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow him. So we aren't carrying a wooden cross like we did. But, so what does that mean, take up the cross?
Well, that's a good question. The Lord's saying, he says, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. In Luke's account, he says, let him take off his cross daily. That's Luke 9, verse 23. Take up his cross daily and follow me. And so what does that mean? Now, this is interesting because at this time in Jesus' ministry, he has been telling his disciples repeatedly that he's going to go to Jerusalem and die. And they're not getting it. They're just not getting it. I mean, they're too enthused, they're too joyful. We can be in, there are a lot of things that cause us to be in denial. Sometimes it's being enamored with somebody. Sometimes it's being super excited about something. Sometimes it's being depressed and discouraged. Sometimes it's just not wanting to face that we have to make changes. So they were in denial. But I think it's because they were just so excited and so joy-filled to have him with them that they just, yeah, he was saying it, but they weren't. And so when he says in Luke's account, in Luke chapter 9, verse 23, and in the one that Rod just read, Mark chapter 8, verse 34, take up his cross and follow me, is a prophecy of the mode of death that he was going to suffer. The mode of death. So they well knew what a cross was. They knew what that was. And so what the cross was what? Generally speaking, the Romans and the people who crucified people, the Persians, and so on. Yeah, the execution, criminal. Like the Old Testament says, cursed is he who dies for a truth. You know. And so it was a punishment. It was it was intended to be a deterrence for crime. They wanted people to live as long as they could. Except in the Jews' territory, and they had to put them off the cross before the Sabbath fell on the seventh day of the week. But what was it to Jesus? So he's saying to follow me, so the cross has to mean something else to Jesus, right? You remember Gabriel's message to Mary in Luke chapter 1? Yes. And he also told Mary, so yes, even a sword will pierce your own soul. So he said, this is going to cause you a lot of grief and a lot of pain. And so literally, Jesus' fate was sealed before he was actually born. Now, for most human beings, we would say we don't know how they're going to turn out. We can do the best we can to try to train our children and teach them. But we're not omniscient, and we cannot know how they're going to turn out. But in terms of Jesus' life, it was known. And it was known several hundred years before Jesus was born. The prophet Isaiah. In Isaiah 53 talked about how he would die and where he would be buried. And so the cross, in terms of the worldly governments, was a form of execution and deterrence for crime. In Jesus' case, it was a form of salvation for us. It's quite different. It was his mission. And so I want you to think of that word, that it was his mission. His mission was to come to the earth, to live, to teach, to set a wonderful example, to fulfill the words of the law. Matthew 5:17, that's why he came. John 17, he said, it's done. I've done all that you sent me to do. And then on the cross, when he finally was ready to breathe his last breath and give up his spirit into the hands of the Father, he said, it is done. So he had come, he was talking about more than just his physical life. He was talking about the mission that he came to live and to serve. He said it's done. So the cross for Jesus was his mission. Right? Is that helpful in understanding what's our cross? So you hear people a lot of times saying, somebody doesn't have a very nice thing. That is my cross to bear, he says. Or someone has something else is going on in their life, that something else is bringing misery or something. That is my cross to bear. Is that really what this is talking about? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered about that because it says it's like being a Christian is people say I better cross the bear because I have a disease, right? I have this or the other, and that's always in a negative. And being a Christian shouldn't be in a negative.
Exactly right. It's our mission. And you think of what that took Paul through. You think of the difficulties that it took Paul through. You know, he was beaten, he was shipwrecked, he was stoned, dragged out of town, dead. And you look at the list of things that he suffered through. It was cross to bear was his mission. And so you're 100% right. And we should think of it positively. And I think of the book of Philippians, where joy is rejoicing is a major theme of the book of Philippians. It's also a major theme of the book of Revelation. You think of the rejoicing when we overcome. And so it's there. And the book of Hebrews said, if you look at Hebrews chapter 12, it says, talking of Jesus, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, suffered the shame. So his mission took him through a lot of hardship and a lot of difficulty, but the hardship and the difficulty was not his mission. His mission was at the end of it. Get to the end of it. And our mission, and so I'm hoping, so Rod asked the question, well, what does that mean to take up our cross? So I hope I'm helping here. But it's our mission. It may take us through a lot of difficulty, but we do it for the same reason Jesus did, because of the joy that awaits us. And we get a lot of joy in life. You know, Jesus, no doubt, experienced a lot of joy in his life when people followed him and committed their lives to him. And people sometimes that nobody would have thought would follow him, like Matthew the tax collector, and Simon the zealot, Simon Zelotes. And so, you know, without a doubt, he experienced a lot of joy. But the greatest joy was on him. And so when he says, go ahead, sir.
So bearing his cross, no matter what.
Yes, it is, and the reason for that is, and I like that word, we fall short, because we're too short-sighted. I'm sure that you've been through times in your life that you thought you've been in such a difficult situation. But now there are some problems we get into that have a definite end. So we know how we're going to do it, we know when we're going to get out of it. There are some things that are like that. But there are other things that catch us sometimes. It gets us to where our brain is not processing enough of it to figure out how. This is never going to end. It's never going to end. And most of those problems happen up here. You know, we get to thinking it's never going to end. Never will. But then surprisingly, it does end. But you're not even aware of it. Until sometime later, when you look back and you say, man, why was I thinking that? Because another day came, sun rose again, we moved on, and it's not that we don't remember those things that happened in the past, it's just sometimes if we look back at it and we're honest with ourselves, that we were just looking at it too negatively. And we didn't have enough trust in God that He's going to carry us through this. And it is going to be better. And I think of the book of Revelation too, when the souls under the altar, under the throne of God were crying out, how long, O Lord, how long? And they were the ones who had been beheaded for their faith. How long, O Lord, how long? How long what? They were already dead. I think probably one of the factors that they would talk about is how long are we going to let our brethren suffer on earth? And the answer in one form or another is until Don't repent. And so why are we here? We're here to follow Jesus. Not until we're done, because we never get done. Never finish until we die. But we're here, the church remains here on earth to follow Jesus until he gets done. Or he's finished. That's why we're here. And that's why that very simple command, follow me, is so important. And I think of Mary and Martha, too. And Martha was cumbered about with much service. She had other things. Now, she was doing what was expected of her as the matron of the household. She was doing what culture and Judaism expected of her in terms of hospitality. Okay? And she was a good woman. There's no doubt about that. Mary and Martha and Lazarus were close friends of Jesus. And Martha was a very, very good woman. And Mary, her sister, was sitting at Jesus' feet. And so Martha complained to Jesus. But here I am, cumbered and doing all this stuff, and don't Mary going to give me a hand. Martha, we're cumbered about with much service. So what did he say about Mary? You remember that? Mary has, she's chosen a good part. Chosen a good part. So sometimes, what I'm saying when I talk about that, sometimes it's difficult. Our priorities aren't that clear. Sometimes they aren't that clear to us. And we have to think it through just a little bit. Jesus wasn't condemning Martha when he said that. He was trying to encourage her and help her out. And we find those situations in our lives, many, many different. We face a challenge as to whether or not to do what, to follow Jesus. And so in terms of the people, as I think I just said a few of these different things, that James and John and Simon and Andrew were following me on the fishers of men. And then we go back to Matthew chapter 8, verse 22. I'll start reading in verse number 18, Matthew chapter 8. So when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side. And a certain scribe came and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So what happened to the scribe? Then another of his disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go bury my father. And Jesus said to him, Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead. And so what? Did they follow him? Right. But these give us some very good indicators of some of the priorities that we have to establish to follow Jesus. And so in the first case, he's telling people who would follow him that we're going to have to make some sacrifices. I think every one of us in here has a home that we can go home to. Jesus didn't have. Once he left Galilee, he didn't have. And so he rested wherever he could. Went to Peter's house on occasion when he went up to Cana, Galilee. And so he's telling us that there are some creature comforts that you may have to forbear in order to be a follower of Jesus from time to time. And I can guarantee that that's true if you go to foreign places to work. Any of you read about that young husband and wife who was killed by a gang in Haiti just a few days ago? Did you read about that? Yeah. Now they, as far as I know, they weren't members of the Lord's church, but they were in Haiti helping with a good work in Haiti. And evidently the gang couldn't get any financial gain out of it, so they just killed him. Plus, they feel that they used to be director of the orphanage, I think, where they were working. So they gave up a lot to go to a place like that. And it makes some of the things that I struggle through in India feel in comparison. Sometimes we just don't know what it means. To prioritize everything lower than we prioritize our mission on earth, to take up our cross daily and follow Him. That should always be our top priority. And again, emphasize the word daily. Now the question is how long does it take us to get to that point? Sometimes it takes a little while. Sometimes it takes a little while. It did for me. And it probably does for most of you as well. But that should always be our goal. And again, I think of Paul in the book of Philippians in chapter 3, when he said, all the other stuff, right? But whatever I gain, that I did just like a garbage heap to me. But I might gain Christ and attain to the resurrection of the dead. And so it took Paul a big chunk of his life to get things figured out. And we hope we can get things figured out before we pass on in kind of a limbo. And so in the next case, what do you think he means here when he says, follow me, but then let the dead bury their own dead?
Atmosphere.
Okay? Right?
I was gonna say that God comes first.
Yeah. And George is probably right when he says, let the dead bury their own dead, because you know that you don't take somebody and leave them in a cemetery and then they have zombies come up and bury them. That's not what happened. So he's talking about in a figurative sense, obviously. So the Spirit says that the priority is, what's the priority? Follow Jesus. That's the priority. He says there are those, if you want to be spiritually alive, you need to follow Jesus. Because there are others spiritually dead who are going to take care of those things. And so these are both statements of priorities. How we need to set our priorities and establish our priorities. And something else I want you to understand about this too is that Jesus knows, think of Peter. Peter had been with Jesus just as long as everybody else, all the other apostles. And he had just told Jesus, he said, I'm willing to lay down my life for you, before Jesus was arrested. And so what did Peter do? He followed from afar off. First, that's what he did. When Jesus was arrested and taken before the Sanhedrin, he followed from afar. And that's what a lot of us do for some time. Now, maybe when we first become a Christian, we're zealous, and we want to get it done. We want to move, but then we start slipping into a little bit of lethargy, and sometimes a little bit apathetic, and we're still followers of Jesus, but we're following him from afar off, and it makes us uncomfortable for other people to find out we're a Christian. Because, my goodness, if somebody finds out I'm a Christian, what are they going to do to me? What are they going to say to me? And so we think like that a lot of times subconsciously, that we follow from afar off. And so that's exactly what happened to Peter. He was in a situation where 3 times he was challenged about his discipleship. And he denied that he was the disciple, and the 3rd time he cursed. I have no idea what he said. But Peter was given a chance to repent. And this is something that we need to think about for ourselves. Jesus knew that Peter, he told Peter one time, he said, Satan will sift you like wheat. I mean, he's going to hammer you, Peter. But Jesus said, I prayed for you. I've mentioned several times John 17, where Jesus said that he didn't pray for the 12 alone, but he prayed for all those who would follow him through their word. So that means every single Christian in here, Jesus prayed for. Every single person. What did Moses do as a mediator when Israel sinned? He went before the Lord, and he prayed, and he pleaded for atonement. To pray means to beseech. You know, if you've ever seen legal terms or legal papers and things like that are written, when somebody goes before the court, they use the word pray. I pray. So I'm beseeching, I'm asking this. So that's what it means. And so Jesus prayed for us. And that ought to really, really get stuck in our hearts. Because none of us do as much as we should do for Jesus. But he knew that. He knew Peter was going to mess up. He gave Peter an opportunity to repent. And so I just want to finish the lesson. I can read it. Maybe another time we can finish some of the rest of these, but I appreciate the comments and on everything here. But when we think of being a disciple of Jesus, what makes us as members of the Lord's church that we believe is the church that was established by Jesus, built by Jesus in the Bible, and bought with his blood? What makes us different than other people who profess to be believers in Christ? What makes us different from other people in other churches who profess to be disciples and to be followers of Jesus? What makes us different?
How to do it by his word.
Yeah. That's what we do. And we need to get our priorities straight. Doesn't mean we won't stumble from time. Well, you count. Absolutely count. Grace and goodness of God will have time. Fine-tune things better in the future. And so that's who we are. You know, if we're followers of Jesus, that calls for commitments from us. We can't follow from the distance. Just not. We have to be willing to take up our cross daily. Follow him. This may be the last summer some of us live. I'm not being negative about it. What happens all the time. People that got up and followed Jesus took advantage of the opportunity. The ones who did not follow Jesus missed a once in a lifetime opportunity. Something we don't want to have.